Cap was up.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, TV ready? So I'd like to call the Budget Review Committee to order. It's June 21st, 2023. It's 7:05. We're in the Aldermanic Chamber. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire.
Here.
Alderman John Sullivan.
Here.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
I am here.
Alderman Ernest Jettie.
Here.
Alderman June Karen is going to be running a little behind, but we do expect her. Alderman at Large Michael B. O'Brien Sr. is present. And our chairman, Alderman Richard Dowd.
President, we have a quorum.
Okay, also in attendance are Alderman Lopez and Moran.
All right.
And we also are joined by John Griffin, CFO, Tax Collector, Treasurer for the City of Nashua, and in his honor, the Mayor, James Donches.
And Cheryl.
Oh, Miss Cheryl Linder, I am so sorry. You weren't up here, but there are other people, when they do come up, Mr. Chairman, I will jot them down. I don't know who's
Okay.
going to be speaking. Okay.
All right, public comment. Is there anyone that wishes? Yes?
Attorney Bolton is also here.
Oh, yes. He's quiet. He's behind.
Oh, and our, and our attorney, Steve Bolton. Thank you, Mr. Bolton.
Okay. Public comment. Is there anyone that wishes to be heard in public comment? Seeing no one. Communications?
There are none?
What does wrap-up session mean? I think we'll get to that in a second. But
Yeah.
unfinished business,
There is none?
new business resolutions,
There are none?
new business ordinances,
None?
tabled in committee.
Uh,
I believe that we're still holding on R 23-118, so.
Yeah, pending is our 23-118. We'll hold on that, but I do have a motion.
Yes.
My motion would be to remove from the table 23-125, which is the pending budget for the city of the fiscal year 24.
All right, the motion on the floor is to take R 23-125 from the table. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. R 23-125 is now on the table. This is the wrap-up session. We've heard all the individual departments, June's here, and go through their different departments. We've had a public hearing on the budget last night and heard comments from the public. And this evening, the Budget Committee gets to take actions to either add to or subtract from the mayor's budget. Each motion will be made separately. And I handed out sheets so we can make it easier for everyone, including Mr. Griffin and the clerk. The motion that's proposed, made by which alderman, discussion notes, and then a vote, and we record the for and against and whether it passed or failed, and its impact on the FY24 budget. Are there any questions relative to that? Nope. Okay, so, Mayor, did you want to say anything before we get started, or?
Well, I'm just here, Mr. Chair. You heard the discussion of the budget we had last night, obviously, and the presentation at the beginning, if you can remember back to that. Budget up 4.4%. I know you've gone through every department and may have various ideas. So I'm really here just to answer any questions that any members of the committee have, or give you, you know, if you want my perspective on anything, to give you that.
A few of the aldermen on the budget committee called me today. They would like to know what the impact of the added money for schools is, where it goes, how it's addressed in the budget, and how it may help us.
Well, I think I can answer it, although I would ask CFO Griffin to make any additions. We don't know yet how much money it is, so it's hard to put anything in the budget. So it depends on how much it is as to the impact. When we first began to look at the tax rate, we were thinking that, or the state was projecting a reduction of 2.7 million, I think, in school aid. Now, that's not gonna happen, and there will be some level of increase, which is very good news. But the tax rate that we were projecting with that reduction and with the loss of $2.5 million of pension costs was, you know, not a great one. So we now are still gonna lose the $2.5 million in pension costs, meaning we got $2.5 million last year, which we're not getting this year, or it's 2.2 million, which basically pushes taxes up 1% before we get to the budget. But we can also count on getting more school aid than we did last year. We're just not sure how much. So to the extent that we get more than last year, each $2.5 million helps us to the tune of about 1% on the tax rate.
So in previous years, when we got money, and it's always the case, we get money from the state after the budget is passed. That comes in as revenue, correct?
Correct. So that gets factored in. So the DRA ultimately calculates, I mean, given CFO Griffin and his knowledge, we know, we think, we can approximate to a very close degree what the DRA will establish as the tax rate, but they ultimately do it. And before they do it, they include in the assumptions the revenue that they know is coming from the state. So before the tax rate is set, when they set the tax rate, they will plug the school revenue into the budget, well, into the tax rate calculation. And so it will definitely be reflected in the tax rate. And you know, if it's different than an assumption we make, then that will mean that the tax rate is lower. If it's different or, you know, higher than the assumption we have made, then that will reduce the tax rate from what would be projected based on the assumption that the city had been making.
And just for clarification, we come up with what we feel is an estimate of what the tax rate's gonna be, but the tax rate is actually set by the state.
Correct. That is
Okay.
correct.
Any questions for the mayor? Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, during the,
Yes.
what's that?
Did you say last night? Is that what you're trying?
No, during the previous sessions, when we had the different division directors come in and present their budgets to us, some of us committee members invited them to tell us whether, you know, in the budget book, you know, it showed what they requested and what you proposed, and in most cases, what the book said that they requested was the same as what the book said you proposed. And it came out that some of them said, well, that really wasn't, you know, what it shows in the book is what the mayor's proposing, and we kind of encourage them to tell us, you know, what more they would want, and so some of them did, and you know, I wanted to give you a chance to respond to, you know, some of their requests, you know, like the fire department. The fire chief said that one of the things that he wanted that wasn't in the budget was $50,000 to do a building assessment. And he explained to us that this had gone before the Capital Improvement Committee and was approved by that committee, and that it's kind of a necessary step for the repair of existing fire department buildings and perhaps the building of a new fire station. And so he kind of made a compelling argument for the need for that 50,000 for that study, but you didn't put it in the budget, and I'm wondering how you feel about that.
I think the Amherst Street Fire Station, needs to get fixed, because the floor is cracked, and apparently it's not, an imminent threat, but not a wonderful situation. So, especially given we might get some more school aid, I was trying to keep the tax rate with the projected rate we were looking at was not great. So I was trying to get money anywhere we could. And this was not really a cut in the sense that there's a list of possible capital improvements you could put in the budget, and I didn't put that in. So, but there's a lot of other stuff I didn't put in. You can look at the capital improvement list. But if you said you thought that was a good idea, I can't really argue with that. We should know what the condition of the stations is. And I assume one of the things they're gonna look at is, although I think the fire department actually has a fairly solid estimate, but one of the things they're gonna, I assume, look at is Amherst Street. And there's probably more work than just the floor, but that is the most imminent issue at that station, I assume.
Okay, and one of the other things he mentioned was an assistant fire chief. I think you were already provided for that in your budget, but you're starting in April.
Now, I thought we had discussed this and agreed on it. He wanted it to start the chief says the position is very necessary. My initial inclination was, well, we can't afford to add people to the budget. But he said that the chief makes the argument that the position is very necessary, and proposed at 6 months. Meaning halfway through the year, the assistant chief would be hired and then would be carried forward into the next budget. In order to save a little bit, I thought we had talked about doing it 3/4 of the way into the year to save, 30,000 or whatever it is, and that's what I did. But so I guess I would say, look, the important thing, I think, from the 3 months will go pretty fast. The important thing is to get it, if you're looking for a new job, new position, to get it in the budget so it's established before the next fiscal year. Now, while you're asking me that, there's one thing I should have mentioned. The budget suggests that Great American Downtown would get $25,000. Now, that was actually a mistake. In the sense that I had wanted it to say 50,000, which is an even, the same amount as last fiscal year. But somehow the budget team is using this new software, and somehow the amount that was originally proposed for fiscal '23 was carried into the budget, which that number being 25,000. Rather than the 50,000 I had intended. Last year, what happened is I had proposed 25, the budget committee and the board voted 50. And so my intention was to just carry forward your number from last year, this year. But for whatever reason, only 25 appears in the budget.
Okay. And
Follow-up question?
So one last. I'm sorry, it's not the last, but another item that the chief mentioned was, I think it's a captain for the medical team. I'm forgetting the title, but
Yes, I know the position you're talking about. So my understanding was that the department felt, okay, they'd like that, but it's not absolutely necessary this year. So that's why I cut it out. I mean, obviously, they want it because they put it in the budget. So the question is really, how essential is it during fiscal '24? But my understanding, just from talking about it, was that, you know, it would be not the end of the world to cut it out, but I don't want to speak for the department because maybe I'm mischaracterizing.
okay. And
Follow it?
another, the chief also talked about an IT person, and I think Mansfield for, radio communications, Mr. Mansfield talked about, I think the same person.
Yes.
I think it's a
and
part-time position and at $32,000. How do you feel about that?
The position would take care of the fiber optic cable and try to improve the network that we have that allows various departments to communicate with each other. The request was for $65,000, but that is a part-time job, maybe 25 hours a week. So in talking with our IT people, it seemed that probably that's more than the market. You could probably hire, that's more than the market, we think. And you could get a person with this type of expertise for less money. And since it's a part-time job, we didn't really think the full-time equivalent of, 100,000 plus really was necessary. And therefore reduced it to a figure that we thought we could get someone qualified, a wage, a salary, that we thought someone that's qualified could be hired for.
So, are you saying that you've provided for that position in your budget?
Yeah, it's there, but it's a reduced number.
Okay.
So it is in the Mr. Mansfield budget is the, citywide communications. John can correct me, Mr. Griffin can correct me, but I think it's in the citywide communications budget. It's not in the not technically in the fire budget, but the fire department is interested in that function. But it's in the citywide communications.
Okay, thank you.
All set?
Thank you, yes.
You have a question for the mayor? Okay, Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor, I wanted to go back to the school aid, the state aid, because I have the general fund detail revenue report through May open in front of me. And I see that this year we got just under 44 million in state adequacy aid for the city.
Yes.
And going back to your earlier comment, we would get that plus, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because in our, I just lost the page, but I want to say you had budgeted for about 37 million. You forecasted about 37 million in revenue.
Well, there was also an offset of an increase in a different category of school aid, so the net loss, we didn't just pull these figures out of the air. This is what we were being told by the finance people at the school department and what they were being told by the state of New Hampshire we would get. So Mr. Griffin can give you where the net comes from, but there was that reduction, but another addition. So the net loss that we were being told we might incur or suffer was 2.7, 2.5, somewhere in there. And so if the but it's pretty clear we're gonna get more money than what we were told at the time we prepared the budget. So, instead of the net loss of 2.7 or 2.5, we will get more in total than we got last year. And what, maybe Mr. Griffin can tell us about the net, how that net situation, the gain and the loss worked.
Certainly,
Griffin.
John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. A little bit complicated because last year, there was a movement to reduce what's called SWEPT, which is the state portion of the overall education aid. And Mr. Donovan, as the mayor indicated, this year, he was projecting total 57 million. So 57 million minus a $21 million swept is the 36 million that he has given us to put in the budget. Now, the combination of the swept this year and the state adequacy aid on this, in this budget of 57 million is less, as the mayor indicated, than we got last year. Last year, they reduced the swept, I think it was down from 20 million down to 14, and then they added not only additional state adequacy aid, but a couple of categories, like really, really needed aid, you know, I'm trying to remember what the number,
Well,
it was more for,
it's a weighted amount based upon the percentage of free and reduced lunch kits.
So the bottom line is, the extra money that we're getting from the state just passed, I believe the mayor's, governor signed it yesterday.
I think he signed it yesterday.
So that money was just recognized in the state's budget. Takes a while for it to get to Nashua, so we don't know exactly what the number is yet. Alderman Sullivan?
So to bottom line it, do you feel that we will get at least the 40, let's call it 43 million? Do you feel we'll get
Yes.
at least that amount?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
All right. These questions for the mayor, they can wait because I was asked to have the attorney Bolton here to describe the tax cap numbers, and then I promised him he could lead. Unless you want to stay for the whole meeting, but. So could you explain, a question came up last night about the tax cap. Could you just give us an overview where you feel we sit relative to the tax cap?
We're doing it correctly. The Superior Court last year, when one time Alderman T. Boom brought an action against the city, he lost. So as far as I know, we're doing it the same way this year as we did last year, and the court upheld it.
Any questions? Well, it was almost a tie, but, I'm gonna go with Alderman Jettie, because he's the one that asked to have Attorney Bolton here.
okay, thank you. So I know that, you know, I think there's been a lot of confusion at least in my mind, and probably other aldermen are also uncertain. So, you know, we had you know, the charter provision, which is section 56-C, you know, outlines the so-called tax cap, spending cap, and you know, there was a lawsuit, not this most current one, but one, the one that ended up going to the Supreme Court, where,
The other one that I won,
right,
and one in the Supreme Court.
where the court.
That one, right?
Where the court determined that the tax cap was, I think, invalid because it did not contain an override provision. And so that, I think, left us without a tax cap. the legislature, amended the law to provide that tax caps or spending caps that had been enacted before some date were now validated. But I think you said, before, and I think again last night, that the stat.
I didn't say anything about it last night,
Excuse me?
Alderman Jettie. I didn't say anything about it last night.
Okay, well, maybe it was the mayor, and you said the mayor was correct, so.
I would be going out on a limb if I said anything else, I think.
Right. So the mayor last night, thank you for the correction, said that, that the provisions in the ordinance, section 5-145, so I know you know this, but for other people, there's the charter, section 56-C, and then there's revised ordinances, section 5-145, which talks about the preparation of the budget, and it's got a bunch of rules that the mayor referred to last night about what can be included in calculating the tax cap and what can't be, and different ways of handling it. And he said that as a result of the court action that or the legislature, I'm not sure, but that those ordinances, that the charter rules, the charter can't be overturned or overruled by the ordinances. The ordinances are subject to this charter, and that those ordinances talking about what's in and what's out, as he put it, were no longer valid, and that what we're left with is just the charter provision. So could you comment on that? Are we bound by 5-145 or not?
To the extent it differs from either state law or the charter, those ordinances are not valid, because you cannot provide by ordinance something that is contrary to either state law or the city charter.
Okay, so where does that leave us as far as, how does that, what guides us tonight as we try to adopt a budget that complies with the law? So in 145, it talks about, the proposed budget has to state, what the gross domestic product implicit price deflator for state and local government consumption expenditures and gross investment is for the average for the last 3 years, and how this, proposed budget either complies with that or not. Do we still follow that?
I believe the resolution before you does do that.
Okay. And, okay, so we can feel the budget that's been proposed by the mayor, you're telling us it complies with the law, and that as long as whatever additions we make to it, if we make any additions, as long as they're under the number that Mr. Griffin has provided us, that we're fine. We don't have to worry about any violation of the law.
Well, that's my opinion. I don't profess to be infallible, but as you pointed out, I've beat back challenges previously.
I think even former Alderman T-Boom said last night, no matter what we do with the budget this year, no matter how we calculate the cap, the budget will still fall under it because the cap is so high.
Well, yeah, but if you
Unless we
wanted,
added a,
if you wanted to appropriate, you know, $500 million to
Yeah.
build a stadium and try and lure the Patriots to Nashua,
that might do it.
I think we might run into a little difficulty with the numbers, but
Yeah, that wouldn't be enough.
failing something that dramatic, I think you can be reasonably confident. Mr. T-Boom, I'm sure thinks he's correct, but he has found in the past that when he goes to court, it's a little more complicated than he anticipated.
Okay,
All set?
Thank you.
Alderman Sullivan.
Yes, I think, I was just reviewing the city charter, and it seemed that the sticking point last night was the word revenue. And really, it was just an open-ended question that, I think that the speaker, Mr. T-Boom, last night was commenting about how they used to do it, and now how it's done now, and the sticking point was all about revenue, and it's a pretty broad term. And I was thinking to myself last night, the only way that we would be able to go back to specifically outline what would be in the spending cap under revenue would be to really change the charter to really, I mean, it would have to specifically say revenue to include item, not to include grant funds. I think that was the sticking point last night, because we consider that to be an expense because money comes in and it goes out. So it's still an expense, which I understand.
I mean, if there's a question for me here, I
My
don't
question,
really.
my question is, if we want to get specific, then we would have to do a charter change, correct?
In my opinion, we are following the charter as it exists. If we want to do something else, we would have to change the charter.
Okay. That was my question, thank you.
Anyone else for Attorney Bolton? Oh, yes, Alderman O'Brien?
Yeah, I just have something for the Board of Aldermen. In my time here, 8 years, I don't think we, even though we lost the cap, I don't think we really went above it. We always, as a board, use it as a guide and try to get for our taxpayers something that is prudent. But I would like to say what this is in the complexity of the issue. That issue was brought up on the floor of the State House. People who are not associated with Nashua, Berlin, Farmington, you name it, they got the vote. You know who didn't get the vote? The citizens of Nashua. Whether they wanted the cap or not. Maybe getting a charter change, which would be very complex, and they'll have to go to a vote. It might not be out there, you know. They do say every community has had a tax cap. It's called elections, you know. So the thing is, I thought that was kind of underhanded. I mean, I've heard testimony in different other items that come up because a train was making too much noise on the tracks overnight. Why couldn't they solve that in that community with an ordinance? Why are you coming up and asking us to write state law? That should never have been done, in my opinion. If it's a Nashua problem, it should have been solved by the Nashua residents. And I'm kind of happy to say, I think the majority of the representatives from Nashua did not support that resolution at the State House.
Any other questions for Attorney Bolton? Yes, Alderman Lopez.
Okay, so I want to make sure I'm not getting confused, Attorney Bolton, because I think I just heard the topic of being discussed as a tax cap, and before that, it was very heavily emphasized that revenue was the issue. The spending cap, as it is identified in the charter, my understanding from what Mayor Donches was saying last night was that the charter actually really only identifies expenditures, and that's why if we receive a grant that we're likely to spend, we have to account for it so that we're able to spend it. Am I accurate, or am I getting confused?
No, I think you are accurate.
Okay.
In fact, the charter doesn't call it a tax cap or a spending cap. The charter calls it budget limitation. The charter doesn't say much in this regard about revenue. It talks about the expenditures, the total expenditures, and the next year's budget can't exceed the total expenditures of the prior years. Much of the discussion, much of former Alderman T-Boom's focus was on grants. The fact is, when we receive grant money, it is almost 100% of the time contingent upon us spending it for the purpose for which it is given. We make an application for the grant. We say we're going to spend it for this, which meets the qualifications of the program for which the money comes in, and we agree to spend it for that purpose. And we agree to spend it. Now, it's state law in New Hampshire that you cannot spend money without an appropriation. So when we get a grant in, unless we've provided for it in the budget, that we have money that is authorized to be spent when it is received from a grant, we accept grants that are unanticipated when the budget is adopted. In the course of the year, we say, you've seen, all of you, I believe, have seen many resolutions that will say to accept and appropriate a grant from the federal government pursuant to the such and such a program for police officers, or for violence against women, or for a myriad of other things. So that is a further appropriation. An appropriation is to authorize the spending of money, and that's what happens. So there was a lot of talk about, you don't know whether you're going to get it. You apply for the grant, but you don't know if you're going to get it, or you don't know you're going to get all of it. You ask for $200,000 and maybe you only get $150,000, or well, if that happens, apparently you don't spend it, right? Because you only have to spend it, you're only allowed to spend it for the purpose for which it is given. But the fact is, all our revenue and all our expenditures are estimates. The fact that we're estimating what grant money might come in is no different from we're estimating what revenue we're going to get from the motor vehicle registrations. And it's no different from we're estimating how much revenue we're going to get from the building permit fees, or the tipping fees at the landfill, or the wastewater billings for the water usage in businesses and residents in town. So all of these are estimates. So the fact that we don't know for certain whether we're going to get this much money from this source, or that much money from the source, or we're going to have an exact expenditure of X dollars for paving so many streets, we're going to pave 20 miles of streets this year. Well, until we put that out to bid, we don't know exactly what it's going to be. Frankly, even when we do put it out to bid, we don't know exactly what it's going to be, because there's always contingencies. There are things that can go wrong. There are things that can make it more or less expensive in any case. And it's a lot of what management is all about. But the fact that you don't know exactly doesn't make any difference for your revenue calculation or your expense calculation. You do the best you can. And that's what it's all based upon. Now, there is, in fact, a state law that talks about spending caps or tax caps, and said those provisions in a city charter can exempt grants from the calculation. They can. If your charter says that grants are accepted and won't be counted in the calculation, that has to be approved by a 2/3 vote, if your charter allows for that. Our charter doesn't. So grants have to be included. Pretty much that simple.
Any other questions for Attorney Bolt? All right. So, we're now ready to make any potential motions. I think I'm gonna go around counterclockwise. I flipped a coin earlier.
Well, Mr. Chair, does anybody have any additional comments or questions for
from the
me?
mayor? Yes, Alderman Oram?
Thank you, sorry. I'm not on the committee, but I just had a question. Actually, more for CFO Griffin. He might, unless the mayor knows every line item, like CFO Griffin does off the top of his head, which I'm very impressed by the way. Director Photo had mentioned not refunding 2.5 positions in DPW. Could you point me to the page number for the appropriation details there that cuts those positions?
So what we have, and I have in my information is 1.5 truck drivers in the street department. So that would be line number 51,100, full-time wages, 1.5, roughly 75,000 in salary reduction. She may have referenced 2.5 individuals because she was already assuming she didn't fund, but the cut itself was, the reduction itself was 1.5.
But, and then, sorry, follow-up?
Follow-up?
Does that other position just not being, it's been open and not being filled, is that right?
So, subject to check, they didn't include one in the original submission. Then when they thought about their needs, they came back with 1.5 positions. So she would know that there's 2.5, but 1.5 was the reduction.
So in this, in the budget, so we're looking at one full-time person cut for $75,000.
It would be, 1.5, so 50 and 25.
And that was.
And it's just not funded. They didn't wipe, they might fund it next year as more funds become available.
Yes, so, may I, sorry.
Follow-up?
My reason for asking is because I'm working with a handful of folks trying to figure out best ways to support DPW and school sidewalks, streets, and various other things. Actually, you and I had several conversations about it. And you know, it seems like every time DPW comes to the board, they're always mentioning how much work they're doing and how they can't find people to fill positions and that they have a lot of work to do. And now we're not having them have an opportunity to hire those, that 1.5 person, making it worse for them when they do have a potential applicant. And you're obviously not Director Photo, but I'm not on this committee, so otherwise I make a motion to refund. Is that even to put those back into restore, thank you.
Restore, not refund.
No.
We haven't spent it yet.
They're not gonna give us a check.
Restore that position, or both positions in order to not kneecap them any more than they already are. And this is just the last year or plus now. I think I'm on year 2 of just hearing every time DPW comes down here how much work they have, and that they have the same guys who shovel streets, do the trash pickups, mow the grass. Everyone's doing the same thing, and they just can't get people to hire, but there might be opportunity to hire them if those positions are.
One of the problems that DPW is having right now, they're in competition with a lot of other entities for people with a CDL, a commercial driver's license. And some places, I think there's even some in the state, that when they hire them, they pay for their commercial driver's license. I'm not sure whether DPW has that set up in their budget or not. But they're competing with the fire department, the police department, the park rec, well, that's part of the same division. But there's particularly bus drivers. Bus drivers got a big bump because they didn't have enough bus drivers to bring kids to school. So for a student, up their salaries, and everybody had a CDL and over driving buses. And so at the moment, they can't find people to hire. I think if they had an abundance of people they could hire, they probably would have gone in for more people. But if you can't hire them, you can't hire them. We can put it in the budget all we want, but it's just gonna sit there unless they all of a sudden have a proliferate of people that will have CDL licenses, but even the state's after them. Yes, go ahead.
So I hear you on that, and I think, then what's the harm then to re-adding it back in if they're never gonna be filled? Because maybe there is an opportunity for them to be filled, especially if a recession comes and someone comes to a safe city job when they lose their private job, when the private business is cut back.
Well, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Griffin, but they're keeping the positions in their budget, the physical positions, they're just not funding the salaries, is that correct?
That's correct.
So if they found people all of a sudden during the year, we could add that money back into their budget, supplemental.
Yes, but when I'm speaking with DPW, they said they can't do anything in regards to advertising for those jobs if there's no money there to say, hey, we can actually hire you.
If all of a sudden people became available, they could come to us and ask us to fund the position so they could advertise.
Seems like a circle.
Yeah, it's a budget thing. Tom, Alderman Lopez?
Thanks. I have a question, I think to the mayor, but maybe CFO Griffin knows better. We see a lot on the Human Affairs Committee that, like, money gets approved, budgeted, put in the budget, and then like the executive committee marinates it or barrel ages it, and then we suddenly have it available like 3 days before we're supposed to vote on it or whatever. Do you anticipate anything like that happening with the education increase that we're hoping that we're gonna get? Would that have an effect on the city budget if the city had to cover money that was promised, but wasn't actually a lot, like, made available?
Mr. Griffin?
So, if I may, that with regard to the state adequacy aid that the mayor talked about, and I talked about this with the timing with when Alderman Jettie had some excellent questions. I think we're kind of fortunate in that we'll close this year, figure out what the surplus is, learn about the state, what they're gonna provide us. So by the time we get to the tax rate setting, we're gonna have a lot of this information. As a matter of fact, when the mayor was talking about the tax calculation, the DOE, Department of Education, communicates directly to the DRA. And when we get their tax forms that we fill out, the city portion, they've already populated. That 43 million, whatever the number is gonna be on a line item, and which is a good thing. And it comforts the DRA that they have control over the monies that the state legislature is providing to the city. So I don't see it being like a time crunch that all of a sudden we're gonna have 2 or 3 days to react. But the mayor and I and the other members of the budget team, and this is why on May 9th, he explained some of the revenue potential shortfalls, trying to let you folks know that it could be a 3% increase without even looking at this budget. What we're here to report tonight is we don't know the exact figures, but it's not gonna be that. And then you get to the budget increases itself, and you can kind of have a manageable tax rate. But we are in, I'd like to just suggest, because there was confusion about these rates we're dealing with. We had a 7% increase in 2022, CPIU Northeast. We have a 3-year average that affects the mayor's increase and other things, 4.1%, 3-year average inflation. Because 3 years ago, there was a 1.3, then it climbed. The 5.9 that former Alderman T-Boom was talking about is the 3-year average of the state and local government implicit price deflator. But as I reported during my comments when I was here, it was 9.1 last year. So obviously, if we had a 1.3, a 5.5, and a 9.1, and the average is 5.9, it's gonna come down for the three-year average rather slowly, right? So that's why everything was kind of confusing last night, and some of the residents were like, I don't know what the number is, but we were facing 7% inflation 2022. We hope it's not that this year. We're getting reports that it might be in the 4% category and heading down depending upon recessionary pressures and what the Fed does with interest rates. It's gonna hover around 5%, but it's a three-year average. So I think, wanted to clear that up while you had those questions. But again, I don't think we're gonna get last-minute things from the state, especially if they've approved the budget as most recently as yesterday. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes,
I had two
Alderwoman
questions
Kelly.
for the mayor so that he can go home. Or what he needs to be. So question one was around the GAD funding. Do you know where that is in the book so I can make sure?
40.
Page 40? Do you have it covered? Okay. And then the second question I had, I actually appreciated you had announced that you're promoting from within your team earlier this week. And I'm wondering if that allows us to potentially reduce your budget for your staff as someone's moving up. And that current position wasn't one that you typically had.
Well, of course, that person's former job is open now, and we intend to find someone for that. So my answer would be, no, we can't do that.
All set?
Yep.
All right, no objections. I'm gonna flip the coin early. I'm gonna start to my left.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh,
if I can be excused, I have to be in court tomorrow morning.
yes, you can be excused,
Thank you.
and the mayor can be excused.
All right, well, good luck. And I will see you next week, for sure, if not
Yeah,
before.
for sure. All right. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a motion, and let's start off with an easy one, what I hope. My motion is under civic and community activities, page 40 of the budget book, Great American Downtown, to increase the amount to $50,000 in total. It seems to be, as the mayor has explained, that there was a little bit of a mistake that was made. Last year, we did increase it last year, something similar, and we gave them 50,000. So this is basically keeping with last year's zero increase, so there's no percentages or anything else. I don't think I need to mention too deeply on the good things that the Great American Downtown does. Of course, we're all familiar with it and the holiday stroll and everything. So I hope you support me with it. And I'll share this motion with Alderman Kelly because I think that's where she was
No, I
headed
have
to.
another one, so you can have it.
Okay, thank you,
But
Alderman.
I fully support it.
So just for information, right after the budget books came out, the mayor pointed out to me that they had made an error and it should have been 50K and asked that we do something during the budget process. So just want to go over that piece of information. Any questions, Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on that same page, I just noticed that there is $25,000 allocated for Great American Downtown. Alderman O'Brien mentioned that we would up it to 50 to pay for the holiday stroll. However, there is a line item in there, holiday stroll, $30,000.
I think you misunderstood me. I said in my lead-in that some of the things that, Great American Downtown does is the holiday stroll. I'm not saying this had any particular funding to the holiday stroll.
Just so you know, I think that other 30,000 for the holiday stroll or other departments, Mr. Griffin? Is that police, fire, DPW, and
That's correct.
not the GAD?
Any personnel that need to be paid or other expenses would be paid by that 30,000.
We also charge GAD 50,000 to have their office in the Hunt Building, which I think should just be swapped so we don't have it in the budget book, but evidently we don't do that, so. So it goes in one pocket, comes out the other, yes.
I work with a lot of nonprofits, and even giving them free rent doesn't mean they can generate revenue, so for them, it might be more valuable to have an executive director that's paid consistently and able to generate the revenue they need to pay us the rent back.
That too, I mean, and I was just using that as an example, but they raise other money, because it costs more than 50K, but we've always, at least in the last 3, 4, maybe 5 budgets, we've given them 50K. At least, I think, maybe more. Any other questions, concerns? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. You went for one.
Mr. Chairman, I do have another motion.
Okay. You are also keeping track of all of these, right?
Yes, I am, regrettably. I'll yield, I do have another motion, so.
Maybe this is the same one.
It would go next to,
I'm done for now.
you know, on it, okay.
Oh, do you have someone with the Great American Downtown? Okay, I'm going to a different line item.
So am I.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion on Fire General Fund Line 51, page 109. And that is to increase the line item $34,812.23. This would include the new assistant chief's position. I do like the line,
I missed it.
it's under 51, it's line 51, and even though it isn't clearly identified, it's under salaries and wages.
So
So
basically
51,100?
he's adding money to the revenue, the salaries line of the fire department? Fire department, yeah.
Fire department.
Of that amount that you just mentioned to, this is for the new assistant chief going from a half year instead of just a quarter year. I believe that's,
Right, half year,
All right.
half
Yeah,
year.
Brian, could you repeat the amount again?
Yeah, that is $34,812.23. Okay, the proposal would be, the fire chief did ask for a total of $69,624.50. It was halved at the level of the mayor, with a quarter start date towards the end of the, the beginning of the fourth quarter. But I think Chief Buxton is looking to move the fire department in a new modern direction, mostly with some of the objectives of working to attain that ISO rating that we all kind of want, ISO-1. And to do any changes, the structural changes such as this, what you need is good management in the top before you start filling the positions in the bottom. So it won't throw a hard start July 1st. This will start in January, which will give enough time and for the budget to catch up and everything, but if not enough time to start with the new position. And that way Chief Buxton can work and get this solid up so we can go on with the future, plus the other restructuring needs that he has. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
questions? Yes, Alderman Wiltshire.
That's the position that the mayor stated tonight that he only funded for 3 months?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think he might have slightly indicated that he wouldn't be overly upset with the half year because when we ended up with the school money, and so far, we're not adding a significant amount to the budget that would have any major impact on the tax rate yet. Any other questions or concerns? Alderman Jettie?
Yes, through you to the maker of the motion, is it your intention to make any additional motions to add any other position to the fire department?
Oh, you can't wait? Do you take your Christmas presents on Christmas Eve?
I'm just trying.
I did, Alderman
just trying to
Jettie,
find out
yes,
how much-
I do have one more, yes.
Some people do that.
Okay, and would that be the
The IT position.
IT, not the
No.
EMS, whatever that,
No, sir.
the medical person?
No, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, these motions have guilt by association.
Alderman Dowd?
All right, Alderwoman Kelly.
If you would indulge me for a moment, I know that Chief Buxton is here. I did miss the fire evening, so I was just wanted to hear his perspective on starting a chief in January, if that's going to support his needs.
I know he would have felt left out if he didn't come up since he's here.
Figured he's here.
Good evening, Steve Buxton, Nashville Fire. So to start off, in full transparency, the conversation I had with the mayor when we were adjusting the budget, he did indicate to me that he would be adjusting this to a quarter year outside of my half-a-year request. Well, it didn't light my world on fire, so to speak, no pun intended. I was happy with the fact that I was getting my foot in the door. Upon further consideration and discussion with my staff, the intent of this position within the master plan is to develop the professional standards within our organization. This position will oversee the recruitment and hiring of our firefighters, as well as the promotional processes. All of those things take place in the springtime at Nashville Fire Rescue. So onboarding a new assistant fire chief in the springtime when you're trying to hire people and run promotional processes, which are very competitive within our organization, we are very lucky, is not the best setup necessarily. That's why I really appreciate your consideration to increase the funding or restore some funding to the budget so we could start this position in January.
Chief, just for clarification, you used to have another assistant fire chief, and it was cut during the Mayor Lozo era.
That is correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe one of the duties of this new assistant fire chief is to work with the ISO 1 certification, which, by the way, as was pointed out by somebody in the public last night, that will lower the city's people's insurance on fire, because a department with an ISO 1 rating is a very high thing as far as insurance companies. Is that correct?
That is correct. We would be the first fire department in the state of New Hampshire to achieve the ISO 1 rating. We are operationally, I would say we are right there. We're just a few points away. The last time they were evaluated, which was 2 years ago, we can call them back to reevaluate the city at any point in time. But unfortunately, right now, we don't have the administrative bandwidth to undertake that project.
Questions? Alderman Jettie?
Yes, thank you. So I happen to be speaking to a constituent, and I made the argument that you just made, and the constituent asked me, did I know how much in dollars and cents this was going to save people in the city as far as insurance costs are concerned, and whether or not that would be offset, that would offset the increase in this additional
I
person.
don't know if the chief knows, but if I knew, I'd certainly be in the insurance business.
So I can't provide you a direct answer to that question. I will tell you that when you achieve an ISO 1 rating, the insurance savings is mostly seen on the commercial side of the house, policy-wise. So the normal residential insurance is probably not going to see much impact. It would be more on the commercial side.
But the cumulative savings for residents of Nashville, businesses of Nashville, would offset the increase in the price in the budget. Is that, I think that's what your question was, or Alderman Jettie, right?
Yes.
I think that would be fair to say, yes.
All set, Alderman Jettie?
Thank
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Just to clarify, I'm in the supplemental information on the fire page. Assistant Fire Chief right now is listed at 1.25 positions, 179,758. That will go up to 1.5 because we're adding another quarter to it, correct? Bringing that to a grand total of about, about $215,000. I just want to make sure that we're only adding a quarter to that position essentially.
Correct.
To the current budget, we'd only be adding 34,000.
I understand. I just want to make sure.
$812.23.
Want to make sure I understand. It's an add of 35,000.
Yeah.
Ish.
Ish.
Yeah, ish,
I'm an ish guy.
ish.
Any other questions for Chief Buxton? Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And Alderman Dowd, if I may, I do have one final.
We'll give you one more.
Thank you so much. I would like to propose this would come under now, and we'll discuss that at length, Fire General Fund, line 51, page 109, $32,000 for the new IT division. And to speak briefly on it, not to take anything away from our wonderful IT division that we have in the city. I have worked with those guys, they're phenomenal. But however, the fire department now is getting much more complex. It's no longer Fireman Fred that you see in the episodes of Leave It to Beaver. And what Nashua is going to is a new radio system. They'll be putting new alerting devices within the fire stations. And so therefore, this would come under the fire department's IT division. Now, taking that into account, we in the fire department send people out to get trained and everything else like that. This won't have to be done. There seems to be a candidate that is recently going to be retiring that works within the fire alarm division that is extremely well-versed in all the needs. He's worked on the fiber optic cables before, knows how to do it and everything else. So therefore, I think it would behoove us, while he's still within the work and ability, to hire this particular person to make these, what they are is kind of dramatic changes. My son, who's a lieutenant on the fire department, I've only been gone 8 years, and he says, Dad, you won't even recognize the place, you know, because of the newer technologies and the different things that these guys are facing. And, you know, I think we see that with everything else in the world. So I hope you support me for an IT position within the fire department. Thank you.
And by the way, this afternoon I checked with several people. This is not part of the IT structure that we were talking about relative to what happened in the school department. This is citywide communication. The two are apples and oranges, so it's not part of IT. Did you have something, Mr. Griffin?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think you want to add these dollars to citywide communications, not Nashua Fire Rescue. Is that what you want to do? So
He
you'll
asked
have
me
it-
that earlier, and I said,
I'll yield to the chairman on that.
maybe we can, if we pass it here, after this budget's over, you know, wherever they end up, you can make sure the monies follow the person.
Well, just for the practicality of it, the half of the salary is in citywide communications, and
Which is part of the police budget.
which is
Sort of.
part of citywide communications.
It's never been clear exactly where they fell.
But from an accounting perspective and paying the person, instead of paying them half out of the fire department and half out of citywide communications.
Would it be appropriate for him to change his motion to just say, to add this person to citywide communication, and
Correct.
where they get placed is, you know, they can arm
Well,
wrestle
I
later.
think the intent, that my understanding is the person is gonna work with the two folks that are on that team, and they're gonna enhance, as Alderman O'Brien said, all the related fire things that aren't, that are specific to the knowledge of the person that's earmarked for the position. So if you could, I mean, I would recommend you increase part-time wages, which is on page 122, account number 51,200, you can increase that by 32,000. And then the person can get paid appropriately out of literally the place where he's gonna be reporting to. That would be most helpful. Thank you.
Ryan?
Yes, I'll stipulate. Could you repeat that? I have page 122, and now would be Department Citywide Communications.
Correct.
Can you just bear with me?
Yep.
I talk faster than I write. Okay, and to increase it $32,000. And what else did you say?
The account number would be 51,200, part-time wages.
Count 51,200, okay, and this will be Fire Department IT. Would that work for you, Mr. Griffin?
Citywide communications. would be
Citywide
fine.
Communications,
And encompass all of
okay. Mhm.
All right.
All right, I amend set of motions. Does everybody have that?
Any other questions on this motion? Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. So we set aside $32,000. Does that include salaries, benefits, pension, the fringe benefits? Is that all rolled up in there, or is there gonna be costs on top of that?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
if I
Mr.
may,
Griffin.
there'll be costs on top of that. That's the person's wage is gonna be the combination of 33,000 and 32,000.
But as a part-time person, the amount's not the same as a full-time person. He's already retired, so
I understand, but it's still gonna be more than
it'd be
32,000.
some minor amount.
You'll have, just to be specific, you'll have the FICA and MEDI, because the federal government's gonna be interested in receiving that amount, and you'll have,
Can't get away from FICA
right, FICA, MEDI,
or Social Security,
correct.
federal piece. Any other questions? Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. I thought about this in a split second since you've made the motion. I can't support it at this point. We have $300,000 set aside in a contingency fund. I think it's $300,000 to establish a cybersecurity fund. I understand that this is IT, that's cybersecurity. I'd like to see that person come in, get a foothold on it, take a look at the entire department, and then make recommendations from there, as opposed to adding people in.
It's a
and then
completely
go.
separate thing. They're not even associated. They're not doing anywhere near the same things. One is installing radios and keeping radios and communications up. The others are dealing with cyber security and computers and stuff. They do different things and they don't report to the same people.
With all due respect, information technology, cybersecurity, and everything are all intertwined today as we go forward. That, to me, is something that I'd like to see the cybersecurity person come in and say, this is how we want to build out the department. I think this is the way to go. Just my opinion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may, I think everybody would appreciate, since we do have Chief Buxton here, because I unfortunately disagree with Alderman Sullivan, because the intentions that I had was, in your presentation, what does he understand about the alert system for dispatching at 2 o'clock in the morning? Possibly nothing. This person does understand the requirements. So through the chair, can we have Chief Buxton give us a brief explanation of what would be expected of this new position?
Chief, you wanna make another approach to the podium.
Good evening, Steve Buxton, Nashua Fire. So this position is something that Bill Mansfield and myself worked in collaboration on to establish some needs within both of our organizations. Currently, there is nobody filling the IT need within the fire department. IT on a city level, as far as a desktop computer, phone lines, and some of our MDTs are handled through city IT. Outside of that, we have field deployable devices, tablets. Our MDTs costs are getting shifted to the fire department. Our software upgrades for our mechanics, our software platforms we utilize within our fire alarm division and so forth are also getting shifted to the fire department. Through the ARPA funds when they were awarded, the city is investing in a new fire station alerting system that comes with a software platform. We have a training platform. Everything is cloud-based now. In this position, we would have oversight and management in working to build an IT management program within the fire department, which currently doesn't exist and is spelled out in the master plan of one of the things that we need to do. In addition to that, the individual that Alderman O'Brien specified does have significant intimate knowledge of the fiber network within the city. They do have specific intimate knowledge about the radio system and the bidirectional amplifiers that, with all the building that is going on in the city, we are now requiring to be utilized. In not only new construction, but also some of the older, larger buildings, such as our hospitals, our schools, and so forth. Those need to be overseen when they're being installed, as well as annual inspections, and I think that that is really what Director Mansfield is looking to utilize this position for.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. You all understand the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All set.
I yield. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Going around, Alderwoman Karen,
I'm fine for now.
Alderwoman Wiltshire,
No, mine's done.
absolutely, Alderwoman Kelly.
Thank you, Chairman Dowd. I have a number of motions in front of me. One is a fairly easy one. We had a clerical error that we needed to adjust. So I'm proposing that we reduce line 55620 on page 99, software subscriptions, to 25,700. We talked about that during the budget, as I mentioned before, that it was just a clerical issue.
Okay, what department is that again?
I'm sorry, that is in financial services.
And Mr. Griffin, you concur with that motion?
Yes, I do.
Any questions on that motion?
How much, sorry,
Yes, Alderman Sullivan?
how much are we reducing it?
150,000.
Down to 150 or by 150?
We're reducing it by 150,000
Okay.
to 25,700.
Thank you.
We covered most of the other.
So the impact is negative 150.
Everybody understand the motion?
So that is to reduce, correct, Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Any other questions, concerns? No? All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderwoman Kelly?
Yes, please. So my next motion is in the welfare department, page 139. We had a good conversation with Mr. Mack. I would like to see the funding restored for him. It was a historic year, he talked about it, so I would like to propose that we amend the budget for his division to, I'm sorry, I'm not saying that line. I want to give him $50,000 more,
How much?
50,000.
Welfare administration.
Alderman Wiltshire?
Welfare administration or welfare welfare,
Yeah, which line?
I know. This is through another alderman, so I'm trying to figure out the line myself. Just give me 1 second.
Alderman Lopez?
I put it under the shelter assistance because that was what he explicitly mentioned. There was a big surge in.
Shelter assistance, 55810? Yes, that's what it is. Thank you. You just didn't have it in here. So
I use a PDF, so it's
that's
all
okay.
Greek to me.
We're page one, thank you for this assistance. So it's actually page 140. We're looking to increase shelter assistance from 350,800 to 400,800.
So I was under the impression that that number was reduced to 0 because they were taking money from the, what was the line, Mr.
The trust
Griffin?
fund you're talking about?
Weren't we allocating the money from a reserve account?
So the way I remember it, and I can, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the request was reduced by some with the implication that they would take 50 or 60,000 from the expendable trust fund, which is at about 385,000. And it has been a particularly rough year, especially with the cuts to housing assistance, et cetera, throughout of COVID. I don't love the idea of welfare, so like using their expendable trust fund as sort of a, I'd rather have them have the money that they need to make sure people are housed. And if it doesn't get used, it can be put back in the trust fund.
Mr. Griffin, can you review the approach that was taken by the budget team and the mayor's side in this item?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mack approached in his budget creation, he suggested to add more than 50, I think it was 100 something,
Yeah, he said he
for
wanted
shelter.
500, yeah.
And then very open discussion with the budget team, including the mayor. We recognized he had a $385,000 expendable trust fund for welfare that hadn't been used since he arrived in the late 90s. So trying to limit the amount of the budget increase, working with Mr. Mack, no one was gonna go without, it's state law or not, maybe even federal law, but no one was gonna go without. So we thought that we level fund his budget, the shelter budget, and use the expendable trust fund as necessary. So I want to report, the month of May, we had to use some of the 385,000. We had to use 38,000. So clearly, the federal, state, whatever money that was paying for these services before during COVID has dried up. So I don't think it's an unreasonable request to add 50.
So just,
And as you folks know, you get a nice report from Mr. Mack monthly. You get a nice report from last year, this year, and you can see the amount that's needed. So the strategy of spending the 350 that's budgeted and then drawing on the expendable trust fund, I think still a good strategy. But I think this is a reasonable request that they're making.
okay, so if I understand it correctly, he does have 325,000 in his budget right now. We still have somewhere near that amount in the expendable trust if we had to dive into it for some reason. And right now, the motion on the floor is to add 50,000 to that 325,000, is that correct?
I have
To 350,800.
350,800, so it's gonna be
Yep.
slightly over 400,000.
400, 800.
All right, everybody understand the motion? Does anybody have questions? No? No questions? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, I have one more.
Okay, Alderwoman Kelly.
Okay. So I would like to make the motion to restore the 1.5 truck drivers to the street department. So that's page 194. We're looking at, I think it, maybe you can help me out here, would it be wages full-time, or is it go somewhere else? We could just do, pay line 51 by 75,000.
So basically, if we had this money and they're never able to hire those people,
Goes back into,
they would have that money in their account. Would it be a better motion to put that money in contingency, and if they're able to hire those people, we transfer it? Mr. Griffin?
I would say, you could put it in the street department budget, so you don't have to transfer it if they can hire. The beauty of putting it in there is that there's an intent to spend it on those types of individuals. If it goes into the general contingency is for unforeseen,
Yeah, I know.
you know, that type of thing. So
Unknown
it's six of one,
events.
half dozen of another, but if you put it in there, I think that'd be fine,
Okay.
the street department.
And the dollar amount was that?
75,000.
Total?
That would I remember and I just want to make sure I completely understand, but there was, the discussion at our meeting was that there was really a reduction of 2.5, but she took out 1 before it even came to the budget book. So the 1.5 is what was reduced, so I'd like to at least
Okay.
restore that. And I actually, my understanding here and my concern here is that we've had a lot of discussions about plowing and, you know, sidewalk plowing and not having enough, you know, similar to what other aldermen have brought up. And when I asked at the very end of the meeting who they were cutting, they said they were cutting drivers. So I would love for them to have it there if they are able to hire them, because we know it's been an ongoing issue. They work really hard and they need that support.
I have no basic issue with it as long as they have trucks to go along with it. By the way, to answer a question last night from a member of the public, our plows are used 24/7 round the clock, year round. We don't just have trucks that are set aside for plowing.
Yeah.
And they're all in surf. And we know how long we get from them because they're not sheltered usually. And we ever get a garage to put them in, they'll last a lot longer. But anyway, we use them all the time. The plows come off them.
And then
Anyway, any questions on this motion? Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, could you clarify, what line item are we adding this money to?
So I was just putting it on 191.51, which is how Alderman O'Brien did his previous one, because I don't see part-time wages, so I just thought that might be the best way. And CFO Griffin, if there's a better place to put it, let me know.
Yeah, I would recommend page 203. In the appropriation detail, wages, full-time, 51,100. And just add 75,000
Oh,
to
into
that
streets,
amount
okay.
in the streets.
That's the cleanest place to book it, book it, yeah, book it.
So
Put it-
you are, if I could just clarify, page 203, 51,400?
5,100.
51,100, okay. So if I could amend my
Okay.
motion to add to line 51,100 on page 203, which is the street department's $50,000, I'm sorry, $75,000. So the total would be, do you need me to say the total or can I just go? Give me a second.
My scribe is, I think, has all that.
Okay, great,
Yeah,
great.
I hope somebody listens to the
I did
tape.
not bring my TI 85 tonight. So yeah, that is the request. Thank you.
Miss Linda's taking copious notes out there.
Thank you.
It's also on YouTube.
Thank you, Miss Linda, thank you.
Yes, Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, so, through you to the maker of the motion, I don't remember Director Foto asking for any extra money. I thought she specifically said that she was comfortable with the amount that she and the mayor had agreed upon. So I'm a little uncomfortable just with, perceiving that there's a problem. I know that the problem is hiring drivers, not, at least that's how I understood it. The problem is they can't find enough qualified drivers. She didn't say that they didn't have the money to hire them if she could find them. So could you, am I wrong about that? Do you remember her specifically asking for additional people?
I think that came up, Alderman Karen asked if there were things that were requested that the mayor sort of eliminated from your budget, because I've had several conversations with her. I know she'd like the extra 2 drivers. If they could find them, they'd lasso them, tie them in duct tape and put them in their employ. They're having a problem finding the drivers, but they certainly, if they do find them, want to be able to hire them, so. And I certainly have been working with Alderman Warren on, there are sidewalks that we gotta find somebody to plow. We can't plow all the sidewalks in the city, but the ones that are most critical, which I think we've identified and still trying to earmark on a map, they don't have enough people to do that, including Park Rec and the school clears a lot of the sidewalks. The school has their own sidewalk plows and stuff, but they only clear around the schools. As you can tell by Nashua High North and Nashua High South, there's a lot of sidewalks. And then you've got other schools, long sidewalks to Sunset Heights, Maine Dunstable, and a lot of those sidewalks are cleared by snow blowers and the custodians, but beyond that, it's a combination of city and Park Rec and to clear the sidewalks. Technically, they only have to clear 1 mile because anybody beyond 1 mile is eligible for busing, so. But we're trying to work that out on a map so that we know they're all covered, but right now they don't have enough drivers. And the drivers that drive the sidewalk plows are the same drivers that drive the snow plows, because if you had separate drivers for sidewalk plows, what do you do with them when there's no snow on the sidewalks? It's a difficult question, so. And in this case, they're looking for drivers to help them with all of their tasks, not just snow plowing. Yes, Alderman Jennings.
Yeah, I understand the problem you've described. Alderman Moran and I met with the assistant director and
Andy.
and someone else, the street superintendent.
Yep.
So I understood the problem not to be that they don't have enough positions authorized. What they don't have are the people to fill those positions. So I'm not sure that authorizing an additional $75,000 is going to, I'm not sure I understand how that's going to create people to fill those positions. The problem is you don't have enough qualified drivers. As I understood them to say, it's not that they don't have the money to pay them, they just can't find the people. And that's the problem they're working to solve.
That is correct. They, as was pointed out by Mr. Griffin a minute ago, they want to put the money in their account, so when they find somebody, they can hire them right away. They don't have to come back to the Board of Aldermen and say, oh, by the way, I need another $75,000. And, which takes time, takes about 8 weeks, and they may lose them, because there's a lot of demand for CL rail drivers. Yes, Alderman Jennings?
Yeah, my point is that, my understanding is that it's not that they don't have the money. It's not that if they find qualified people, they're gonna have to come back and ask us for more money. My impression, I may be wrong, but my impression is they've got the money, they just don't have the people. So if they get a qualified driver, they don't have to come back to us. They've already got the money to hire them. It's just, finding the people. So I'm.
Get that clarified, Mr. Griffin?
Yeah, I would say that they have the money now. As a matter of fact, to add a little bit more of the back and forth, Director Photo and her team would have rather had, given a choice, they'd rather have the park equipment, so they can actually mow the lawns, et cetera. We had originally reduced that number, so they've gone through this deliberation and said, we can't find the drivers, so we don't need 75,000 in the street salaries and wages. What they really want is 100,000 in the park rec equipment, so they can buy that. So it's just another added color to the discussions, and that's why Director Photo was very comfortable. I think she sat right there and explained that she got everything. Because there was a good give and take between the budget team and Director Photo.
Thank you.
I guess in retrospect, if they're able to hire drivers now and they need it, they got to the point where they could get more drivers, we have the ability to give them more money later, right?
Correct.
So the question is, do we need to give it to them now? I think Alderman Karen beat you by a whisker.
Yeah, I did.
She's quick on the draw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know when I asked that question about the numbers of truck drivers, Director Photo said that she'd love to have it, but it was not top priority at this point in time. She'd rather have other things, as Mr. Griffin stated. And I had talked to the superintendent of the street department, and he had barely hired 2 people that he had been searching for about 6-7 months. You know, and the question is, how do we get people who might not have a CDL license, but to help them get a license to become a truck driver? And we know some friend of my son, she's a young girl, she is a truck driver, and most of her 8 hours is sitting waiting to be moved up, and she makes $55 an hour. So that's the competition, as Alderman Dowd said. You have a lot of competition, and you have a lot of people that don't want to do this type of work anymore. So I don't see the need to put that $75,000 in. I would hate to see us lose any part of that $100,000 that we need for park rec equipment to keep our parks and playgrounds clean and safe.
Yeah, I would say that money might be better spent putting it in an account to train people. But I don't know if we can do that as part of this budget. It would have to be put in by park rec at a later date and passed under a different set of ordinances. I wouldn't make it part of this budget, but, so while I'm extremely concerned about doing the sidewalks, I think we've got to come up with an overall universal solution before we know what we need and don't need. I think we probably need some more equipment as well. So I'm still waiting to hear more, but Alderwoman Kelly?
Didn't mean to interrupt you if you weren't done. I just wanted to clarify, because I think that some things that were said were unclear. When Director Photo was asked where she stood, she said that the cut was that they had to unfund 2.5 drivers. So if they said that they're unfunded in the budget, so if she got to full complement and still wanted 2 more drivers, the money is not there. Because what the negotiation was is I will unfund 2.5 drivers in order to get the equipment. Is that correct?
Mr. Griffin, can you add?
Correct.
It is
So
correct?
the money's not there. That's all I wanted to clarify.
One additional point, when I drive in, I see DPW hiring sign.
All over the place.
And I'm not sure, you know, kind of like what we hear for the police and fire, they don't have enough, they have more money in their budget to hire additional drivers than this. I look at this as like if they have 20 truck drivers, they only have 20 positions, 16, they can hire 4. These would be like the 21st and 22nd. You know what I mean? I don't think they're that tight. We can certainly react with contingency or something like
Yeah,
that.
I'm willing to hear more people speak, but I'm getting to the point where I think we probably ought to not pass this particular motion, and if they come back later and need people, we can help them, but they can't, they're like way under right now. Alderman Warren?
Yeah, I just want to make two statements. One, we are trying to, a cohort of Alderman Kelly, the school board president, and June Lemon and I will be meeting to try to figure out ways around the shoveling and bring back particular proposals to the respective boards to see how we can improve, whether it's a recommendation to raise wages or be more competitive. So there are other veins that we're trying to do to affect it, and that doesn't impact voting on this tonight. One other thing, I do think it's bad policy to create a budget and then with the intention of changing it later on if needs change, but that's just how I do my budgeting. I try to stick to it for the fiscal year, but I do see what everyone's saying.
Well, you got more money than the city, so.
No, not quite. Only 1/10 of
But
1%.
anyway, in this instance, we have monies in the budget set aside that we could move without impacting the tax rate. So it's not like we're gonna change everybody's tax bill if we add 75,000 later on for drivers if we can get them. But if we're 20 short right now, I don't see them hanging out there. As far as increasing their salaries, I believe those drivers are all union drivers, and that's a union contract, and that's a lot more difficult to change than, and if they're unaffiliated drivers, which I don't know if there are any, no, I'm here seeing no, that would be different, that's easier to change, but unions, not until the next union contract comes up, unless you do a supplement, you don't wanna open up a contract in the middle, because that'll hurt, it really hurts. Alderman Wiltshire?
Thank you. I was gonna support this initially, but after the discussion, I think, I'm not gonna support this motion.
I see, I saw a quick flash over there, I'm guessing it was Flash Lopez.
It's not Flash, I just got tired of holding my hand up. But I just wanted to point out, I don't think it would fit under this particular motion, but maybe an idea for CFO Griffin. We keep talking about how badly we need to recruit people with CDLs, and we're starting to move to the point where we talk about why don't we pay for their school. Maybe we should move to the part where we hire a CDL instructor, since we have so many departments that need CDL staff, and we have staff that may actually take the class and try to upgrade their own positions.
The other thing to consider is that if, in the snow plan, we find out that we're gonna hire more CDL drivers in the school maintenance to do more of the school sidewalks, well then, they don't need them in DPW. We haven't, Alderman Warren's all over this thing, and we're trying to figure out what sidewalks, who plows, we don't know that yet.
Yeah.
Alderman
We're
Lopez.
working on it.
Kelly, Brennan?
Given the discussion, I'd like to rescind my motion. I'd love to have the contingency that this group talks about the snow removal issue, and we have some real discussion and have Director Photo come, because I think we've all brought up some interesting suggestions, but obviously it's what she does for a living. I'd love to just.
But not as part of the budget.
Correct, yes, yep.
Good motion. Alderman Wiltshire?
Do we know what it costs to get a CDL license? Any idea?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
I'll let you answer. Go ahead, Alderman Warren.
I feel like I'm just living at DPW lately. Director Photo had mentioned it up to $25,000 for the schools, the CDL schools, which they've actually have offered to pay people, new employees, to go get their CDL. So
We had,
drastic increases in the cost of the CDL schools.
That's a lot.
We had Director Cummings doing a start on a 50,000-mile race. Did you? No?
It doesn't have to cost that much.
And I think they compared from now to like 10 years ago, and the price has increased like 200% or something like that.
I'll put this to bed after this, but I also had in the back of my mind the idea of potentially looking at people who are retiring that have CDL. Like my father works for Asplund Trucks. He's had a CDL license for 30 years. Is there an opportunity to recruit people who might be like, oh, I'm done with my full-time job, but I might come snowplow for.
I know a retired person has a CDL, but his alderman won't let him go back and drive a truck.
His name wouldn't be Pete, would it?
No.
No,
I got mine.
he'll starve.
Nice.
Alderman Lopez and Alderman Karen.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, having worked for the soup kitchen as a job dog for 15 years, I contributed not a small number of CDLs to the general area, both through First Student, but also through those schools. They do not need to cost that much, but 90% of the ones that cost so much, some of it is because they're basically trying to pay an instructor who could otherwise be like in a cushier job, just not with the student drivers, but with like his own direct income, but also because they have to do the upkeep and the maintenance of the practice vehicles. So it is probably more cost effective to at least look at the possibility of us having an in-house trainer, because then you wouldn't have to pay as much overhead for it.
And the other thing is, if we hire a CDL driver and we put him in a $300,000 to $1 million vehicle, we don't want him driving it the wrong way.
No, give them the
So they should be fully trained. Alderman Karen?
Yes, thank you. So I looked it up, because I knew it wasn't that much money. It says between $3,000 and $10,000.
That's what
Yeah.
that's what I've seen too, but then there's other
Well, I think
underlying
that's-
costs.
I think that's, you know, more
Yeah,
complicated.
Director Cummings
thing.
is
Oh,
out of the starting blocks and halfway through the race.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Tim Cummings, Admin Services. I wasn't going to speak on this, but since we've spent some time on it, I do think it might be helpful for me to provide some details. And it's relevant because actually it came up last night relative to the risk department paying for CDL, and it's actually CDL training that the risk department provides on behalf of the city, citywide. So we pay for DPW training that allows for employees to be able to attain the CDL. The cost of that is between $5,000 and $10,000. Part of the reason why it initiated in risk is actually it comes from the fact that we have to adhere to strict federal regs and compliance to having CDLs here on staff, and part of that is mandatory drug testing. And we have a centralized process to do that. And so Director Photo worked with Jen Deshay, our risk manager, to develop this program in a way to help try to bring in more talent citywide for CDLs by offering this type of workforce training initiative, because we're required to do it anyway, having to provide the drug testing out of the risk department.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So did you rescind your motion?
I did.
All right, so there's no motion on the floor. Are you all set with your motions, Alderman
I'm
Kelly?
good.
Alderman Jettie?
thank you. So I move to increase the capital improvement appropriations, which would be page 224, appropriations, line 81, fire, by $50,000 for a total of $100,000 for a building condition assessment study.
Okay, I'm just gonna step down for a minute. O'Brien, would you run the meeting for a second? I'll be right back.
Absolutely.
I also have to leave, but I just don't want anyone to think I'm storming out.
I'm not asking.
Well, does anybody, we all need a 5-minute recess, or shall we continue?
I would continue.
All right, we shall continue. All right, Alderman Jettie,
Everyone's going.
oh, you got it there? Good, I'll let you work, and if you can hand that to me afterwards.
Okay,
Thank you, sir. Okay.
and could I ask, are you the chairman now?
Yeah, temporarily, yes, sir.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, I could ask the chief to come and speak to this.
Absolutely. Chief Buxton, if you'd be so kind.
While we're waiting,
Yes.
could you repeat your motion, Alderman Jettie, please?
Yes, it's to increase the capital improvement, page 224, appropriations, line 81, fire, by $50,000 for a total of $100,000 for a building condition assessment study.
Thank you.
Good evening, Steve Buxton, Nashua Fire. I think there might be a little bit of confusion on this one. Our initial request for this study was for $210,000. That was the estimate we got to do all of the facilities. So $100,000 would not allow us to facilitate that program at this point.
Okay, that is, Yes, that is some confusion, so. Okay, so I understood you to say that it would cost 50,000 for the study, but it's not, it's 210,000?
Correct. So I think the area that the confusion might be in is we currently have $50,000 in our capital improvements budget for deferred maintenance for our facilities, for all of our facilities. The building conditions assessment study is estimated to cost $210,000.
Okay.
Want to recognize the captains on the bridge.
Thank you.
All right, where are we?
So I made a motion to increase capital improvements appropriations on page 224, line 81, fire, by $50,000 for a total of $100,000 for the building condition assessment study. And the chief has just informed me that, I don't know where I thought I got that 50,000 from him, but he says 50,000 is not enough. It would be 210,000.
Yeah, I know the school one's gonna be 350,000 because there's 20 buildings, but fortunately, they don't have anywhere near that many buildings. But
So,
you have to hire an architect to get in and look at the design and find out where the deficiencies are. And I can tell you from a lot of experience, they're not cheap. No offense to my architects.
so for the purpose of discussion, I'll amend my motion
To the
to 210,000, which would be a total of 260,000 for that line item.
Alderman Ryan, did you want to add something?
I was never happy in the past with the capital improvements and the way things are going. And I thought I was under the impression that we're gonna look at that differently and come up with a better plan to focus in on capital improvements in the city, to target them better. It always seems like, I understand something happens, such as the Amherst Street Station with the floor issue. Nobody really anticipated that. But this goes along with, like I say, in the future, you know, something to identify.
Yeah, that dock is further down the river. We'll get to it, but not during budget.
Okay, so, see, well, the thing is, if I may
Right
follow
after
up.
budget.
Yeah, if I may follow up, I mean, although I think I could support Alderman Jettie in this endeavor, but the thing is, you know, are we kind of putting the cart before the horse? If the other problem is the capital improvements and identifying the need, as you mentioned, with the school department, and there's others equally as well.
I know that after the budget hits, we're looking at evaluating bond issuance for parking garages, fire station repairs. Certainly, the analysis of all the stations would go a long way to giving us a better estimate of what really needs to be done, and therefore a better estimate of cost. So it could be done, the assessment could be done now, or it could be done as part of the bond. The first element of the bond would be to do the assessment. But that delays things, and my concern is an 80,000-pound, $1.3 million fire truck sitting on a concrete slab that's got cracks in it. And I'm sure that, I know that's Chief Buxton's concern too. So I know they're evaluating it often to make sure it's okay. It's not an immediate crisis, but it's not going in the right direction. So, Chief, which is your preference? Biting it all out of one piece of the apple, or doing it in chunks?
So I just want to be clear. We have $50,000 in deferred maintenance that was awarded to us in the capital improvements program. That's in deferred maintenance. We utilize that, and we usually expend that every year, trying to keep up with our HVAC systems, odds and ends throughout the fiscal year. we requested $210,000 for a facility study separate to the deferred maintenance program, two completely separate programs. And that was not funded through the capital improvements program at this point in time until Alderman Jettie just made this program. I do believe that before we're able to make decisions on where we need to invest dollars through a bond to rehab a facility, we need to study all of our facilities. I know I have roof leaks on a couple of the fire stations. We have the floor situation at Amherst Street, and we have a fire station that is probably in need of replacement out on Pine Hill Road. So I think a facility study would be in order. I think you guys are the ones that need to decide which way we would fund that.
So it is in the capital improvements program, and it's in the capital improvements book, it's page 19, B2 Fire, Building Condition Assessment Study, $210,000, and there's certainly a long explanation of why it's needed. The school department's looking, not through this budget, but looking at a $300,000 to do all 20 buildings. We're in a position where we're caught up at the moment, and a lot of our buildings in the school department, not your building, so we have time, the school department has time to evaluate the rest of the schools so that they can be lined up. But I think the fire stations are, at least Amherst Street and Airport Fire Station really need a lot of work. And I think the other stations haven't been fully evaluated when you did your master study, that came out. They hadn't been evaluated, and they needed to be.
That is correct. I forget which bullet point it was within the master plan, but they did state that the city should prepare to invest money in the fire department infrastructure. They should evaluate the facilities to see which ones should be rehabilitated and which ones should potentially be relocated or rebuilt.
Mr. Griffin, do you know whether this could be allocated in unanticipated revenue or some line at the end of the year, or
Yes.
is it being considered in that arena?
Yeah, what I'd like to do is go back to the heart-to-heart discussion I had a few weeks ago on June 1st with regard to the lack of funding for capital improvements between changing the oil on a truck and building a $130 million multi-school, middle school district. We've never been able to fund what the chief is asking. We probably need to, but you have to start at some point. The great city of Cambridge, Mass., $800 million budget with an $85 million capital improvement program. So it's real, and the mayor tonight, he readily admits $812,000 is a drop in the bucket when you're talking about a $317 million operating budget. So when you talk about straightening out or fixing or reorienting the capital improvement program, we've got some great volunteers on that. They put their heart and soul into it. They rate these projects, but they're told, don't worry about the funding. So in my little town of Tingsboro, we have a capital asset program that funds things you need, and they have to make choices. So I've been looking at this for 13 years, and the numbers are it's $500 million of needs, anywhere from a $10,000 study to a $210,000 study to a $300,000. Mr. Smith comes in and says, I need $1 million a year, and he gets 100, right? So that isn't gonna be straightened out. We're gonna have to fund the things in the middle. Otherwise, you're just gonna be bonding in perpetuity. You're actually gonna bond. And your option tonight for the chief is, do you wanna fund the 210 in a bonding authorization? You certainly could. You get the assessment, you go to architectural engineering, get the construction, and that's kind of how we've operated. So you can flip it around and change the capital improvement program, capital improvement, and come up with funding, right? Come up with a pecking order of what do you want to have first. That's the problem we have. So we had a great debate on fire apparatus that you probably watched diligently. Why don't we pay cash for that and bond the rest of the stuff? You know what I mean? We don't have the cash.
Yeah,
This 812 is what we're putting forth to the residents and businesses. This is what we selected, and it's not an impressive list.
So I know for a fact we have over $1 billion in building assets in the school system. And this year's deferred maintenance was $100K from the mayor in capital improvements. Now we're getting some money from another source, or I'd be making a motion tonight. But I've had discussions, and it's for downstream, it's not for now, with Director Sullivan. And he and I are gonna be talking about this program going forward, because in the assessment you guys did they come up with a value of all your fire stations?
Yeah, I believe the current evaluation for all of our assets, facility-wise, is just under $15 million.
So if you look at if you do any of the analysis on how much you should be putting aside for deferred maintenance on infrastructure, I know 13 years ago, 14 years ago now, we determined on the school system at that time, before the new school was built, that we should have been putting $1 million aside every year for school deferred maintenance, and we've been doing $100,000. Last year we got a little more because I pushed it. But we are not taking care of our buildings. And what happens is all of a sudden, oh my God, you've got a huge bond to replace a building because you didn't take care of it, now it's falling down. I could give you all kinds of examples, but Alderman Wiltshire, did you have something?
And a lot of that has to do with the spending cap, you know?
Yeah, it did.
Defer, because we have to meet a certain percentage, so. We've been handcuffed by that for 30 years.
So,
But I guess now I'm remembering your first question, if I may. We usually have appropriations not spent, and this could be an item that you would identify the source and go through the escrow process, because it's a capital item. If we don't clutter the appropriations not spent, and with all sincerity, with operational costs that should have been budgeted in the first place, you're gonna have, going forward, you're gonna have, some good money to spend. It's a reasonable approach to fund this with some appropriations not spent.
yeah, I fully support doing the analysis. I'm just a little hung up on, we put it as part of the budget, or we do it another way. I'm actually, I was gonna ask Alderman Sullivan what his thoughts were, but you wanna start with Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, I just want to say that, I feel that, that the study, I came here with the idea that, the study was very necessary, and, you can't start fixing these buildings until you do a study and find out what's needed.
That's true.
And so, proper planning, requires that we do the study first. And when it was 50,000, it was a no-brainer for me. And, when I spoke to the mayor, 50,000, was no problem for him either. Now that it's 210,000, I don't know how the mayor would feel about it. I guess I still think that, it's important that we take care of the buildings that we have before we start building new ones. And, this is a step in the right direction, I think. I don't know what adding 210 to the budget, what that would equate to as far as, the burden on the taxpayer. But maybe if it could be done through escrow. I'm not sure that doing it through a bond you know, I don't know, I defer to the expert, but to me, 210,000 is a small number for a bond when you consider the expenses of getting the bond and the interest on top of the bond. You know, it seems like 210 is something that we ought to be able to find.
No,
and
my
pay
thinking
cash
on
for.
that was that the first part of the bond would be to do the analysis, and as part of the analysis up front, you would get an estimate for the rest of the cost on the bond, so that when the bond went in, you would have an estimated cost of what they're gonna say are repairs required up to a point. If it goes beyond that, because the stations are in worse shape than we think, but I think most of them are in okay shape, then you would either have to add money to the bond, or you don't spend it and you reallocate it somewhere else, or just don't buy the bonds. But, so you could get a good estimate up front from an architect as to what it was going to be. Then they get into the details. So they do the detail study up front and get an estimate of the cost to what they think is going to be the stations, and then, you know.
Could I follow
Yeah,
up?
go ahead.
So, you know, how do you come up with the 210,000? You know, how do you know how much to borrow if your bond is dependent upon the estimate of the cost of construction?
Well, it's like the schools. We go out to, we put out an RFP to do an estimate of repairs on, say, Main Dunstable Birch Hill. And they come back with an estimate, and then we take that estimate and go for a bond. Same thing here. We do it as all part of one bond. And part of the bond would be the estimate to get the price, but we'd allocate what we think is, I mean, we have a lot of experience in building buildings, so if we can, and I'm sure anybody that's on the Joint Special School Building Committee knows what the cost of architects are. And, you know, they're not cheap, but they would do that analysis. They've done so many of these that, you know, they would do a preliminary visit before we do the bonding to every one of the stations and say, okay, I think it's gonna take us this much to figure this out, and we figured this is probably the things that need to be repaired, and they give us a price, and they're very conservative. So, or we can do the analysis separately and then bond what they come up with. Yes, Alderman Jennings.
Yes, so, could I get an answer from Mr. Griffin about the
Sure.
effect on the tax rate?
Mr. Griffin?
Sure, every 2.5 million is 1% on the tax rate. So 210 would be a fraction of an increase.
Would it be unfair to ask you, like, you know, how many dollars and cents that would add to to the tax rate?
Be 210,000 divided by 2.5 times 1807.
Oh, why didn't you say so?
Great man.
But it's a small number, it's a small number.
Very
The
small.
problem we have, and I've tried to be honest, is Fire Chief Buxton, that you're gonna, you know, you've heard from the police department, you've heard from citywide communications, you've heard from the school, you've heard from the library, you've heard from parking, you've heard, you know what I mean? It's the sum of all the needs that creates the $500 million of the CIC. So what we've done is we've kind of come in and, you know, everybody's got a great bond, 25 million here, 15 over here, you know, and it's like, geez, that's not too bad. I think what we're talking about is what is our capital improvement plan that has roots in the needs, and then you have to say, what is it that you want to do? But safety first, obviously.
Yeah. The other
Safety first.
other alternative is to defer for now and see if we can get the money in another way for the study. But right after the budget passed, we get an estimate of what it's gonna cost to fix Amos Street and the airport fire station and do a bond. Those aren't changing, no matter how many times you study. What they need is what they need, and what they need is they need something fast. So those are options. And then when those two stations are fixed, somewhere along the line, we do the study and find out what the rest of the stations look like and see. And the thing that I've been trying to do is get the capital improvements laid out in a priority basis for funding and tie the capital improvements projects to the bonding plan so that we know in 2026, 27, these are the things that we want to bond. And we sort of have set limits for the out years and not go crazy on something else we hadn't planned on. But that's downstream. I'm gonna, before your arm goes to sleep, I'll ask Alderwoman Kelly.
Afraid you couldn't see me.
I can see you, I'm just.
So, I have many thoughts on this, and we've talked through this a lot, and I think that the study needs to happen. But I also think that we've heard, like it was spoken about, schools are an issue, our library is an issue, Holman is an issue, and so this whole idea of having an actual plan for upkeeping our infrastructure really needs to be considered, because we give them $210,000, we get this report, and then we're gonna get another wish list to add to the $500 million in projects that we know we can't fund. So I'm a big picture person. I'm thinking about how do we come up with a solution that will allow us to start putting more than $100,000 in deferred maintenance on a school portfolio that you said was what, 16 billion? Is that what you said our schools were worth?
$1 billion in
1 billion.
infrastructure.
Sorry, 1 billion.
16 billion. Ooh.
But I think that that is a true discussion that we need to have around if we're building new schools, if we're building or improving our fire stations, what's our long-term plan to make sure that we don't end up back where we're pulling down Elm Street because it's cheaper to build a brand new building.
By far.
I would love to do the study, but I think that bigger discussion that we continue to talk about every year needs to happen, because we can't, if we continue to just put $50,000 in there, we're gonna continue to have the issues, and we're just plugging holes every year.
Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you. I'm kind of still circling my brain where to go with this. But anyways, at the very most, it seems like we're talking to defer it, chief. And something else popped up that you haven't, I haven't heard before. One of the stations has a roof leak. I'm happy to say I worked at the old Crown Hill station where you actually showed up with an umbrella inside on a rainy day. But that being said, I'm dating myself here, but can you go and ask your captains to compilate what is needed for their particular stations? If we go with the bond, you know, have those numbers in preparation, whether for the Committee of Infrastructure and Budget, so that we could work with that and at least have an in-house need of what we want, you know?
I'm pretty sure they already know that. I think he gets feedback back every day. So basically, as I see it, we either don't pass this now and hope we get it at the end of the year revenues and cover it that way, or we don't pass it and we wait and we have an architect look at Amherst Street and the airport fire station, get an estimate on those repairs and do a bond. And at some point down the line, do the further analysis. Or we pass it tonight and up capital improvements $210K, which increases the budget. You know, as I said, I'd like to get Alderman Sullivan's
I appreciate that.
thoughts. Well, you're on a joint special.
No, thanks. You had me at 50, you lost me at 210, I'll be honest. But I'm thinking about this whole discussion, and a million years ago, I used to sell advertising. So let me tell you a little story. So I used to preach this theory called the theory of the glasses. And what would happen is you would have a business owner that would try to take their entire ad budget and they would spread it across all these different, I would use water glasses here, and they'd do a little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit. And the problem is that you don't do enough to make an impact. When I look at this $812,000, I would look at it and say, let's come up with a comprehensive plan is that the number, is that not the number? And then, some people are gonna get, you know, maybe people are unhappy, but you take, okay, sorry, Public Works, we're gonna take your 340 and we're gonna add it to the 50,000 plus a little bit more, and we're gonna take care of the fire department this year, because that is the priority. And then that money actually does it, as opposed to just putting $50,000 against the fire line, and then maybe that doesn't really do much. And so you think like, well, we put aside $50,000, like what is the number? What is the plan? And then fund it. And then some you can do, some you can't. I mean, I think it's, you know, it's not decisions, it's trade-offs. I mean, you hear that all the time. So those are my thoughts.
So, I appreciate your thoughts, because the school department put in this year a little over $1 million in capital improvements. They got 100,000. The total number, and I should have left the page open, the total number, I think, for capital improvements aid projects was, Director Sullivan? Smoke signals?
You want to say $500 million?
What? $30 million? So if we add this 210 to what's already in the budget for capital improvements, it's either a little over or a little under $1 million, which is ridiculously low for maybe $2 billion in infrastructure in the city. We are not being good stewards of our infrastructure, and it bites us later on. When we tore down the old high school, where South is now, we had multiple air handlers rusted shut. We had mold, we had, I'm not gonna get into all the issues we had. When we got done tearing the building down to add to it, we only had the stairwells and one wall. Alderman McCarthy and I always said, we should just torn the whole damn thing down, started from scratch and did a copy of the North, which we almost did, but. So, you know, we can either put a little money aside now, or we can spend multiple millions of dollars replacing buildings later. Like, if the floor falls in at the Amos Street Station, you know what that's gonna cost us? Maybe, could start with a couple $1 million worth of trucks, but, replacing that station, now you're talking, what was Lake Street? That was, I mean, West Hollis Street, that was several million, 15 million?
Before his time, yeah.
Before.
There's not enough room in Amherst Street to build
No, I
what
know,
you have
but
on Lake Street.
it would be if you had took land by eminent domain, but I'm not even gonna go there. But no matter what you replace there, it's gonna be a lot of money. So we can either do the study and find out what it costs to fix it, or we can wait till the floor falls in. It's that simple. I mean, it's just that simple, and much as I hate to add more money to the budget, it still only puts capital improvements at around $1 million, which is ridiculously low, when the capital improvements is saying the aid projects are $30 million. 32 million?
20 million, I'm sorry.
20 million, even so. You know, it costs money to run a city. And much as I hate adding 200,000 more to the budget, it makes sense. Alderman Wiltshire?
It's tough, 210,000 to add. I would really ideally like to see this come out of escrow.
Me too.
But what's the 50,000 gonna do? Are you gonna keep that motion, or are you gonna,
No, I
He
amended,
added it to 210.
you
I
add?
amended it to 210,
Okay,
yeah, once I heard that I had the wrong number.
yeah. Ideally, I would like to see it come out of escrow and not be budgeted, so that's,
I can tell you if it doesn't pass, that Mr. Griffin and I will have a meeting with the mayor and twist his arm to see where we can find it somewhere. It definitely has to get done, but it's just a matter of where we get the money. Right?
Right.
Any other discussion?
I wanna see withdrawing.
No, I don't think, you didn't withdraw your
Okay,
motion.
all right.
No, I didn't withdraw it.
All right, Alderman Lucia.
So the motion is to add $210,000.
To the capital improvements line for the fire department.
Okay.
And I forget what the line numbers were, but
There's
my
no-
scribe over here, I'm sure has it.
Department 81, line 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, it doesn't
Line
have
four.
a ERP code.
Fire.
And I think Alderman Jettie hopefully kept a right record of this. I ran out of space on the city worksheet.
Yes, I did.
Miss Linder, you got that down? Yeah, I'm
Oh,
sure.
you're the best, Miss Linda.
Yeah, it certainly is. All right, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion fails, but we will certainly push to get that money another way. All right, where are we on, you're done, you got any other motions,
No,
Alderman?
that's it.
Alderman Sullivan?
Okay, I have 5 motions to make, but I'm gonna make it real easy on you.
Me or him?
Alderman
Gigi-
Alderman O'Brien, it's all on the same page, and I wrote it all
Yeah,
out.
do you have the sheets? Because we have to go to
I
the,
wrote it all out.
oh, you're the best. Can I have that afterwards,
Of
Monsieur
course.
Beaucoup?
Of course. All right. Motion number 1. I would like to make a motion to remove $50,000 from interfund transfer Department 89, page 223. All of these are on the same page, 223. Line number 2 to 14 Court Street, expendable trust fund. And could I speak to my motion, please?
Sure.
There is currently $50,000 in the expendable trust fund through the end of May, according to the city website. There were 0 expenses drawn on that expendable trust fund last fiscal year. In the description of the trust fund, it said that $50,000 would be equivalent to a year's worth of expenses. Since there were no expenses withdrawn and $50,000 remain, that will suffice for the next fiscal year. Thus, I am motioning to remove $50,000 additional to that fund.
Alderman Griffin, yeah. Mr. Griffin, is that expendable trust, does that have spending authority on it?
Well, the genesis was that there's money being spent at 14 Court Street, there's revenue coming in, and the revenue coming in was designed to essentially fund this particular trust fund that could do certain things in the future that are not taken care of by the building trust fund. So I wouldn't assume this is a building of a fund to be used for certain, I would say, larger expenses of 14 Court Street. Historically, we've put new suppression equipment over there, we've done some roof enhancements.
Did own the roof?
So the thought behind the setting up of this expendable trust fund is to kind of earmark to the renters over there that would, their money that they're paying is actually gonna benefit the facility at some point.
So Court Street, this expendable trust is, who manages the building? Is that our building, city bill?
Director Cummings probably knows that better than I, but I believe it's in this part of the city buildings portfolio.
Yeah.
Portfolio.
So this building is used primarily for younger children and the arts. And we have revenue coming in from a very lucrative place that serves delicious beverages, without naming it. And they just expanded and are paying us rent to offset the cost of that building. But this money, as I understand it, would be for, okay, all of a sudden they started, something needed to be done they had money they could reach out for. I'd be hesitant to. Did you want to say something, Alderman Kelly? Alderman Kelly?
Oh, thank you. I mean, I would say that I think that this is a good example of what we're trying to do in other areas of the city where we put this money aside so that if there's a bigger problem at 14 Court Street, we can take care of it and slow incremental. So there's 50,000 in there, but that's not really enough to cover some of the bigger needs. I don't know how often you've been in that theater. I'm on the board of Peacock Players and I go there a lot with my daughter. She was at camp. It is in disrepair. And so the fund that we put together was to try to make sure that the money that comes out of that building goes back into that building. So I'm not gonna support the motion to remove this, but I think that was the thinking, and I would love to see us do more of that for other buildings.
Just FYI, that auditorium has chairs that were donated by BAE over 20 years ago. I used to
Yeah.
have them in my office
Yep.
20 years ago.
Yep.
Not all of them, but I mean, that thing of chairs, so. And it's still being used.
It
It's
needs
still
a lot of help.
Really comfortable.
Yeah. Well, they're comfortable.
Alderman Wiltshire, did you have something?
Yeah, a question for Mr. Griffin, is there $50,000 in that account now? Or, I mean, this was printed on 3/31,
There's 50,000 in there now.
okay. Right.
But as I kind of recall, the intent, it was not to put money in and take money out. It wasn't meant to be an operational, take care of the electric and other things and cleaning. It was to build. And some of the aldermen, the proponents of it were like, we really need to show a building that's in disrepair, that we're committed to taking some of their rent, some of the revenue,
So,
and building this. So if 3 or 4 years from now, something happens, you have a funding mechanism.
Follow up?
follow up, Alderman Wiltshire?
Yeah, and that's what we were just talking about, and, that we don't take care of things, and in this instance, we're putting money in there, so I don't think I can support that motion.
The building is old enough to have housed the horses when we were using horses for the fire station.
I
I'm
remember.
not- I was gonna stay away from that, but, and I know that the restrooms in there, if one of them gives way, because it's over, it's gotta be, how old are you?
It has happened.
And they lose an entire bathroom. They got no place to go. They would have to come back to us if we didn't have that 50K and ask us for money to fix them. Alderman Jettie?
Yes, so I have a question. This is interfund transfers. And so this 50,000 is being transferred to 14 Court Street. Where is it coming from?
With Alderman Jettie, with your appropriation, it's coming from the general fund, transferring into, taking 50,000, so it's an appropriation. You're appropriating it into the expendable trust fund.
Okay, so could I follow?
Follow up.
So the 50,000 that we're gonna put into here is not 50,000 that we have now, it's 50,000 that we're gonna collect from the taxpayers?
It's 50,000, but I think some of the discussion, as I recall, was we roughly earn 50,000 through the rent and other programming. So the thought on the behalf of Alderman Clemmons was you're kind of taking the money that the renters are paying and you're putting it into a fund specifically with the authorization from the mayor or the administrative services director to fix things that are broken.
Okay, so I know all the money is taxpayer money, but I suppose one could argue that this money is not coming from the taxpayers, it's coming from the renters of the facility.
That's correct. The renters are paying into the general fund revenue,
Okay,
and it's around 50,000, and if you take the 50,000 and you appropriate it, revenue equals sort of the appropriation amount, so.
Didn't we pass
The whole
that?
idea was it was revenue neutral, it wasn't gonna, historically, without this, you had to use the general city building fund that's got all kinds of needs. So, the thought behind the creation, although it is another building fund, but it's dedicated, it's the people that use it of funding capital improvements down the road. That was the whole basis of it.
So usually these are established by a resolution, is that correct?
Yes,
Or
this
an ordinance. Resolution.
this was a
22,
resolution approved.
0 is
So I don't know as we are allowed to do anything with it in this budget process. I think it would have to be another resolution outside the budget process to do anything with that amount. And there's also spending authorities which have the right to spend it.
One follow-up, I'm not sure in the resolution, a little bit unlike the downtown improvement resolution, which committed 100,000, I think it's up to you folks to put money in or
Right.
not put money in.
And to put money in, but the spending authority is who?
Spending authority is the mayor or the administrative services director.
Okay, so not the Board of Aldermen.
No.
So I think that in many cases, that's problematic. I appreciate trying to lower the budget, but that particular amount of money to earmark savings on Court Street is, and unless there's ever a replacement for Court Street, I think we need to safeguard it, my opinion. Anyone else? Seeing no one, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
So that fails.
I'm even gonna mark down that it failed, so I'm gonna keep track of it for you.
Yep.
Oh, you can circle it, but
All I'm
thank
gonna
you.
do is I'm just gonna give it to you.
Yeah.
I'm-
Thank you,
I'm
Alvin.
training for being a clerk someday.
There you go.
It's so much fun.
He's offering to take your job.
No, I'm not.
Believe it or not,
Finance, that was mine for.
come right up here, on the job training, here you go.
All right.
All right, next
One
motion.
down, 4 to go. I would like to make a motion, page 223, to remove $37,025 from interfund transfer Department 89, line number 6, to the Dean Skateboard Park Expendable Trust Fund. And I'd like to speak to it, please.
Sure.
There is currently $135,840 in this trust fund and less than $1,000 in expenses made this past fiscal year. The current fund balance should suffice through this fiscal year. We only spend $1,000 out of that fund. So I'm questioning, why do we need to put in another $37,025 into it?
So I may defer this to Alderman Wilshire, but when we set up this arrangement with former Alderman Dean, the skateboard park used to be over by the bridges to Hudson. And because of that development, the skateboard park got moved under certain conditions. I don't think it's named after David, I think it's named after his father, isn't it?
Correct. Right.
And certain conditions were made in the legislation to move that, and I don't think that we can touch it. That would be a legal, I guess, question, but
You mean
Alderman, keep trying to promote you,
Yeah.
I guess, or maybe demote you.
It might be,
Mr.
So,
Griffin?
yeah, so I want to give a little bit of history, because I have, a few years ago, we actually tried to reduce this budget. Didn't go over well. The reason why is it's tied essentially to the cell tower revenue that is over near the former David Dean Skate Park. So it's not, let's put it this way, it's not, you have to have a like amount. If it's 37,000, you have to put 37 in. But the thought behind it, the spirit of it, is that whatever the good estimate is for David Dean's skate park, the cell tower near it, now it's not near it, but it's appropriated, it's known, it's expected. We tried to cut it in half to save some shekels, and it didn't go over well.
Right.
We tried to cut in half Mine Falls,
Yeah,
David Dean, in Holman Stadium. And it's the same logic for the 14 Court Street. You're trying to build up things. A lot of us that were here at the time when we had to move it, it was a very expensive.
Very expensive.
A very well done skate
Yeah.
park. I'm not a skateboard person, but it looks impressive.
There's a lot of state and New England and even national skateboarding things, and not that I go watch them either. But how old is that? So it can't be that old.
Believe it or not, time flies. I think it could be in the like 2015, 16.
Really?
Oh, I don't know
I
when
guess time
Alderman Dean left the Board of Aldermen, but he was here, he was a proponent of
I remember it being built. then.
spending, you know, it was
It
like
was
a half,
built.
I'm remembering like a
The
half a
first
million
one was
dollars.
built Before, in the 2000.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the one that we replaced, that one was fairly new, and then there was all hell blue about moving it. So we made all kinds of agreements when we moved it, not to mess with it. I can't remember what they were, but that skateboard park is extensively used. I don't know if they've spent that much, but they may be getting revenues in from all these events, which saves the city money on at least those short runs. They don't charge?
No, they better not. That's why they get the money from the cell tower.
Ah. Anyway,
Am I dating myself?
so I think that we
Yeah,
would,
to be,
we would get a lot of pushback if we tried to change it. And again, I think that was established by a resolution. And again, you'd have to rescind the resolution to do anything with that funding. And like you say, the last time we tried that, all hell broke loose.
Like I
So-
said, if I just point of clarification, I don't think, it's not tied, it doesn't say take the but it's expected. And it's to repair, maintain, that's the reason for it, the
So
funding.
if, and I'm not sure we do it as part of the budget, because Mr. Griffin and I have talked about these accounts for years. The ones that are expendable by the mayor and the finance officer are probably the easier ones, if they haven't been tapped in a long time, to zero out and get rid of. But I still think we need to do it by a resolution, not by the budget.
Correct.
So I'm not sure that we can just do this as part of the budget process. That particular resolution that created it would have to be rescinded by resolution outside of the budget resolution.
So are you saying, sorry,
Good.
are you saying that in each one of these resolutions, so I have 3 more motions all around trust funds, around the general fund appropriation of money. Are you saying that it's written into the resolution that we must fund every fiscal year this trust fund?
No. I don't know how, unless the resolution actually says that it has to be funded by, usually the monies that go in, a lot of them, we have to pass separate money. Do you know, well, I mean, you can just, if you just mention the ones to Mr. Griffin, he can tell you, if we are allocating money, if somebody is earmarked to allocate money into it this year that we don't want to do as a Board of Aldermen that we have control over, we can say no. But if it's monies that come from a resolution that say, for instance, the renter at Court Street that puts money into that account, we can't then do anything with that money. Only the people that can spend it can. And if we've made an agreement with somebody that this would go into this account to maintain that building, we get in trouble if something happens to the building, then we're on the hook because we took the money out of that, and we would have to fund it, to fund the repairs.
But can you see my reasoning?
Oh, I know the reason, because I've tried to work with this for years.
Because we're putting money into this every year of $37,000. We only spent $1,000 out of the fund. So why put another $37,000 in if
Are
we
you
don't need it?
talking, you're talking about the skateboard park?
Yes, sir.
That revenue is coming from the cell tower, is it not?
That's correct.
We're not putting it in.
Well,
Well-
it's in the general fund.
It's
But we
because
are
the
putting
money
it
from
in.
the cell tower goes into the general fund, and then the general fund money goes into this account. But it's money generated by the cell tower that, under the agreement of the resolution, we can't use for anything else, I don't believe, right?
we'd have to check the resolution, but it doesn't say take every bit of revenue from the cell tower and put it in. But that's the expectation.
So it is ones that you have questions on, if we say no here, which we might, you can check with legal and get their opinion on what it takes to change that. And if it's allowed, then you can bring it up at the 27th. But if it's not allowed, it's a moot point.
Well, and I'm gonna save the committee's time, and I'm not gonna go through the rest of these. I'm gonna check the resolutions, and I will check with legal to see, if I have any grounds to not fund these.
That would be the safest way.
Thanks.
Because I'd hate to get wrapped around messing with a resolution that we just took the wrong action on and end up in court again, heaven forbid. Anyway, any others?
No, because they're all, no.
You have a motion?
I know I can't make a motion. I want to give you a little history. I know I can't make a motion, but a few weeks ago, Director Photo and Senior Manager Carolyn O'Connor wanted to set up an expendable trust fund for expenses related to this item called the Sculpture Symposium. And I got back to them, I said, you really don't want to set up an expendable trust fund if you're just gonna not grow it, you're just gonna pay the numbers 10,000 out to the people that run that every year. So reviewing with the mayor and Director Photo, if it was okay with the board to make a motion to create in that civic and community activities area a line, $10,000 for the Sculpture Symposium. Now, what happens is, Director Photo, there's no funding source from the city, so she and her team get called from time to time to, in quotes, help out. Moving sculptures, making sure they're not falling apart, I don't know much about it, I'm not a sculpture enthusiast, but if someone was, willing to make a motion, I reviewed it with the mayor and Director Photo, we could put a line, 10,000 for.
I love the one they put in Ward 2. It's beautiful.
We have things like funding for the arts, not quite familiar with that either,
Yeah.
but that would go a long way to help
So
out.
is this also going to be an area where people that want to donate to the arts for that program can put money in?
No, this would be an appropriation added to the civic and community activities area.
So this would be a yearly budget thing?
Correct.
So
I think Alderman Kelly.
I think Alderwoman Kelly,
I think the symposium that we do is an incredible asset to the city. It's one of the largest sculpture collections of a city. And I think they do an incredible job. I'm happy to make the motion. I wanted to know how they've funded it before, though.
I think they've called Director Photo, from heavy labor and other things, they call her and she's been amenable to helping.
Sure.
it came out of the hide of the DPW.
Okay.
And these sculptures are getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
They're beautiful, though. I'm happy to make the motion. I don't know that you gave us a clear line, but I'm happy to make that motion.
So it would be similar, it'd be page 40, $10,000 under civic and community activities, and we'd have a line. We haven't quite identified the series, but it would be a 56 line that we'd create, and if approved, we'd put it in.
So these are, I think from a fairness standpoint, these are world-renowned artists coming into Nashua, developing a piece of art at no cost to the city, and displaying them in the city to depending on how you interpret each one, beautify the city. And they keep asking the DPW to take monies that aren't allocated for this out of their budget to move some of these heavy sculptures and get them placed. And I think it's only fair that we do this.
Okay.
Any other questions on it, Alderman Jenny?
Yeah, I know that the sculpture symposium is funded, perhaps,
Alderman Kelly?
ladies, I don't know if you might know the answer.
What was the question? Sorry.
So I think the sculpture symposium is funded by, there's an organization, I forget the title of the organization, but there's some organization that, the funds, they pay these.
I'm familiar with them. The travel for the artists, the housing, the food, all that's covered by private donations. But they don't have any way of moving these huge statues to put them in place. That's the only thing they're asking for. The rest of it's covered by donations.
Right, so my question was whether they have sufficient funding to, reimburse the city for the cost of moving these things.
My guess is, I'm not 100% sure, but I am seeing Director Cummings saying, no, they don't have the extra money. They're lucky to get by with what they're doing.
Okay.
Alderman Kelly again?
I think it was a good
Kelly?
question. I just wanted to amend, I know it was a very specific thing, but we're the only city in the United States with an annual international sculpture symposium. And it's a quirky little thing that not everybody knows about, but it's really such an asset to the city. So I think $10,000 to make sure that these can be placed when these artists come in and support this art.
I know Ed contributed some money to it.
I'll pay $10,000 if they do me in the sculpture.
Take a lot more
I'll
than
pay him
that.
20 not to.
Alderman Karen? Alderman Karen?
Yes, thank you. First of all, the symposium, because these sculptures are going into public facilities, mostly parks and areas like that, Park and Recreation is the one that brings them to the sites, sets them up and works with the street department. That's always been part of the project. One of the things you have to think about though is how many places we have to put the sculptures, because I noticed one of the new ones is by the exit on Temple Street near the senior center, and that's huge. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's huge. And I know that the committee came to me to find out if they could put another sculpture at Sullivan Park. And I said, if the neighbors have no problem with it, it's fine, because they now have 2 sculptures out there. So, space is going to become an issue down the road, because you're using city facilities to put these massive pieces of work. And I'll tell you, the welder that I live with loves the one on Main Street by the old Indian Head Bank with all the faces. He loves it. He'd like it in his backyard.
Yep. Any other questions on this? Alderman? Yeah.
Does Director Foto have a driver to drive these?
Do you know the people on the
Park Rec.
sculpture symposium?
adjourn.
You don't want to say no to them. Oh, my God.
Park Rec has the driver.
Yep. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any other motions this evening? If not, the motion on the floor is to approve the modified budget that was modified this evening with amendments to R23-125. Is there any discussion? Yes, Alderman? Wilshire?
So by my calculations, we've added $1,812 to the budget.
Which is
Correct.
far less significant than we've ever done. We had a
Got
lot more
done
last
for
year.
that, too.
Could you repeat that number?
$1,812 we have added tonight to the budget.
That's all?
That's it.
Because remember, we had the 150.
Did you have another motion all of a sudden?
Oh, let me have it.
And just to remind everybody, so the other aldermen that aren't here, other motions can be made the 27th when we do this for final passage, but this would be the recommendation from the Budget Committee for the FY '24 budget. Do you have the exact number, just for the record?
So, Mr. Chairman, the general fund, which was modified tonight, is $317,505,102.
All right. So, motion on the floor is to approve the FY, or recommend to the full board, the final approval of R-23-125 in an amount of $317,505,102. Any discussion? Seeing none, all, yes?
I actually have that we dropped it $8,000.
Hmm?
That's what I have. Unless I
Mr.
missed a
Griffin and I
motion.
both agreed, so
What's that?
we both had the same
Oh,
number.
okay. All right, I must have missed a motion.
And our professional scribe sitting in the back of the room with the calculator.
Hey, I'm doing okay here.
I missed you.
We dropped to 23 cents, if that's okay.
So, Mr.
Yes,
Chair?
Alderman Jenny?
Yeah, so what we're doing actually, I think, is we're recommending
To the full board.
final passage, or that the budget be amended and then
Right.
final passage as amended.
Right, to the
Correct.
full board.
Okay,
So it's not official till the full board votes on it.
right.
So just so you know, we have increased the budget, so to pass the budget, we will need at least 10 votes.
Right.
Done this a few times. If there's nothing else, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Write that down. And we will be meeting, well, the Board of Aldermen meeting's on the 27th.
He's spelling unanimous.
Miss Linda will write it for you.
Thank you.
Where are we in the agenda? All right, so that was taken care of. General discussion, Alderman Jettie?
Yeah, so somebody said that the gross domestic product implicit price deflator for state and local government consumption expenditures and gross investment, was included in the book, but I can't find it. Is that
It was included in the resolution.
in the resolution?
Yeah, this resolution on the budget
Okay,
in the back.
okay, and so that provides that number and plus the, the limit on budget, whatever
Correct, that
it's called. That's
calculation,
all in there?
the calculation that recognizes all expenditures to include grants, supplemental appropriations, enterprise funds, and general fund, roughly 412 million, which is approximately 43 million under the cap.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Griffin, Ms. Linder, and Ms. Graham will have a goldenrod copy with a new
Amended.
number on it for the 27th.
Correct.
Any other general discussion? Alderman O'Brien?
Yeah, it's just, I think this is my 8th budget being on this particular committee, and some of it has been the clerk. I'd like to thank Miss Linda for catching everything that I have missed, and Alderman Sullivan too. But 8 budgets, I think we've done pretty good with this one, so I commend you all. Thank you very much.
So this is my 24th budget, but I'm not counting.
Lori just said the same thing.
Alderwoman Kelly?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone. I think we did a lot of good work, talking through some of these smaller pieces that we know have to happen, and then some of the bigger discussions we want to have moving forward. I also just wanted to compliment Alderman Dowd. I loved the binder. I've really
We get
normally
there.
been an online person, but I think it really is nice to be able to flip through, so I liked the binder. And I know that Megan Karen was instrumental in getting us into a online format, so I gave her some feedback from the public comment and my own around being able to search it,
Yeah.
because you can't search it right now. And, we talked a little bit about maybe being able to change the font size as well.
Yeah,
So-
this is the first step of the, using
Yeah.
new software, so.
Yeah, she said they're
Next
very
year's either the
responsive.
print will
and-
be larger, or we'll get
Yeah.
magnifying glasses with each book.
You can we maybe make it so you can ask for a large print format?
Much easier to read, by the way, online, because you can just blow it up as much as you want.
That's all I got.
So, by the way, I wanted to thank everybody on the budget committee. This year, I felt that the budget committee was much more engaged, much more questioning, and we had great meetings, and thank you all for participating. Now we have a few more free nights.
Woo-hoo.
Oh, and there's no hockey, no basketball, what the heck am I gonna
I
do?
know.
Baseball?
Well, you don't have to worry about them Bruins themselves.
Oh, boy.
Red Sox, baby.
All right, so public comment, no.
Thank you.
Remarks by Alderman? All right, Alderman O'Brien.
It's with deep regret, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion to adjourn.
The motion is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we're adjourned at 10 o'clock on the button.